You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Welcome to True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly, out of the darkness appeared Bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Queens. Quick heads up before we get started. What you're about to hear is part one of my Katy's Corner, Katy Reads the Classics So You Don't Have to series on Wuthering Heights. This is a 6-part, spoiler-filled, vibes-heavy recap I originally made for Patreon. With the new Wuthering Heights movie coming out, I know a lot of people want to be book-informed without actually reading all 400 pages of Victorian trauma-filled nightmare fuel that is the actual book of Wuthering Heights. So that's where I come in. Normally, this full series is available either to Patreon supporters or you can purchase the series for $10, but this week only, you can grab all 6 episodes for just $5 if you want to keep going after this first episode. So this one's just a drop to see if this is something you like. In this episode, I do a little bit of Bronte biography, why I decided to do this series, and then I jump into the first couple of chapters. But if you want to just jump right into the first couple of chapters, check the show notes because I have timestamps. So I'll have a link to buy the full episode in the show notes. And if you're already a Patreon supporter, congrats. You've had the chaos with you this whole time. On to the more as we go. Cheers, y'all. Hello, my beautiful queens, and welcome back to another Katy's Corner. And today, we're trying something a little bit different. Today is a literature corner. Many of you history nerds, I know, are also literature nerds, just like me. And I have had Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights in my Kindle library for 5 years and have never read it. Last week, the trailer for Emerald Fennell's adaptation of the book came out, and people had big feelings, and I got FOMO. I wanted to have big feelings, so I decided to finally read it. I actually don't plan on talking about that trailer too much. It led me to believe that the book was going to be a fuckfest, which I was disappointed there a little bit, but back to the book. I tore through it in about 3 or 4 days. I'm not going to say it's like my favorite book ever. It was definitely not the easiest read of my life. I'm glad I read it. It was really interesting. It was definitely thought-provoking. And the next day, I was talking to a friend about it, and she was kind of in the same boat as I had been. Like, oh, I wish I read the classics more. I didn't read that one in school, so I've never gotten around to it. What's it about? I gave her like a high-level TLDR. And then she was like, I wish I could find a podcast of somebody that just did recaps of books in the way you just kind of recapped it for me, so I could just know what the book was about in about an hour, and it's in my language. And I was like, well, I do have a podcast. I could make that happen. So I figured I'd bring that treatment to y'all. Katy reads Wuthering Heights so you don't have to. But first, let's start with the author, Emily Bronte, which is noteworthy just on the basis of sex alone, since she's a woman. So Emily Bronte, in fact, when this book first came out, when it was first published, it was under a pseudonym, Ellis Bell, because she wanted to maintain her initials, but she didn't think anybody would publish it if they knew she was a woman. In fact, her sisters, who were also authors, did the same thing, for a while at least. Anne Bronte was Acton Bell, and Charlotte Bronte was Currer Bell. First and foremost, death. Reading this book, I was just like, man, she kills off characters so casually. And that's probably how Emily Bronte viewed death in her life. Her mom died when she was 3, and she had like 2 or 3 siblings that died. And just everyone in her life, including herself, did get killed off relatively young. and you just had to go on with life, you know? The town she grew up in, I think it's pronounced Haworth, in Yorkshire, England, had a higher than average death rate. So lots of people dying young. And at the time, nobody really knew why. But now, because we know what sanitation is, we know why. Their graveyard in the town, I guess, was on higher ground than the rest of the city. So when it would rain, which it does a lot, especially in northern England, the water would come down from the graveyard to the rest of the town and get in their drinking water. So they were just drinking corpse water all the time, which, oh my God, that is so morbid. This explains so much about Emily Bronte's writing, actually. Another theme is going to be otherism. The main character in this book, Heathcliff, is an outsider who never fits in and then gives up trying to fit in, and instead of being sad, goes for revenge. The whole Bronte family would have felt that otherism in their lives. Not to the extent that we're going to discuss, but still. So the Bronte mom died really young, and their dad, Patrick Bronte, he was an Irishman, and he married their mom. She was an English woman from a well-to-do family. But since mom died young and the kids weren't really socialized with their extended family or people in their town or anything, the kids, for a really long time in their youths, had Irish accents, which would have been really out of place. Also, I read stories about the Bronte kids getting invited to a party, and they didn't know how to play any of the games that would have been like really, really common games for kids at the time. And so all the kids were just like, do y'all live under a fucking rock or something? What is up with these weird-ass Brontes? I think scholars are still asking today. Also, later in life, she and her elder sister, Charlotte, would go to a school, I think it was like in Belgium, like in Brussels or something, on the continent, as they say. And Emily was too much like a fish out of water for her to really, really get a lot out of this school. She just did not know how to be a person out in the world. So this is all to say that Emily clearly felt out of place and probably didn't experience otherism to the point that we're going to see with Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights, but still enough for it to be a theme that resonates with her. So Emily Bronte died at only age 30. So that is all I'm going to touch on with Emily's biography today. So time to get into the book. So why don't you go ahead and grab a drink and prepare to get emotionally wrecked? I trudged through 300 pages of gloomy moors and generational trauma, so you don't have to. We open our story in Yorkshire, England in the 1800s. I think it's like 1830. And we meet our main narrator, and his name is Mr. Lockwood. Mr. Lockwood is fucking funny. He doesn't mean to be, but he is... He's a character, and he is kind of the comedic relief every now and then in an otherwise pretty dark book. So Mr. Lockwood fancies himself a recluse. He's been living in society his entire life, and he's just like, oh my God, people are way too much. I'm going to rent a home out in Yorkshire where I'm just secluded and there's no one around. So he rents this house, Thrushcross Grange. The nearest house is the main house where my landlord lives, Wuthering Heights. It's about 4 miles away. I better go up and meet the landlord. I hear he's also a recluse, so we are going to be besties, I'm convinced. First of all, dude, if you're a recluse, why is the first thing you do when you get to your fortress of solitude look around and say, okay, who are some people I can go meet? I think it's to show like Mr. Lockwood has this romantic ideal of solitude and being a tortured poet or something like that. And also, it's not like he's just going next door to meet his neighbor. If somebody told me, oh, your landlord lives 4 miles away from you now, not that big of a deal for me to get in a car and drive for 5 minutes or however long it takes for 4 miles. This is ye olde days. There's no cars. But Lockwood is like, this is polite society. You go introduce yourself to your landlord. I'm sure we'll have tea. I'll meet his family. We're going to get along great. So Lockwood gets to Wuthering Heights and is surprised to find the gate is locked. Surely they would have been expecting their new tenant to come calling, right? Like, what? This is very inhospitable. And then the landlord comes out and is basically like, what the fuck do you want? Who the fuck what are you doing? Who are you? What do you want? And Lockwood is like, oh, yeah, I'm your tenant. And goes to shake the landlord's hand. And the landlord, like, just looks at him like, okay, I guess you can come in. Ugh, since you came all this way, fine. And we learned that his landlord's name is Heathcliff. And Heathcliff owns Thrushcross Grange, which is often just called The Grange, and Wuthering Heights, sometimes just called The Heights. So Lockwood immediately notices that the vibes are fucking off at Wuthering Heights, and not just because his landlord is a little rude, a little standoffish, but he still has it in his head that he and Heathcliff are alike because they don't want to be part of society all the time. We also meet a member of Heathcliff's staff, a guy named Joseph. They never say for certain, but I'm assuming Joseph is supposed to be Scottish because his dialogue in the book, every time he speaks, it's spelt differently. And when I tried to like say it out loud, I was like, okay, I think that's supposed to sound like a Scottish accent. Anyway, I fucking hate Joseph. And every time he speaks in the book, I try to skip over it. I thought he was a really kind of pointless character. And he's a dick. I did not enjoy Joseph as a character, is all I'm getting at. He's in about every chapter too, so ugh. So Heathcliff tells Lockwood to have a seat and he'll go get wine. And Lockwood goes to pet one of the dozens of dogs that are just hanging around. There are so many dogs in this book. Not all of them are treated great. Didn't love that. But Heathcliff is like, hey, don't pet that dog. She's not domesticated. She will fucking bite you. And Lockwood is like, LOL, if she's not domesticated, she wouldn't be in the house. Like, what is this, the wilderness? And he pets the dog anyway. And the dog attacks him, which Heathcliff just thinks is fucking hilarious. After this visit, Lockwood gets ready to head home before it gets dark. And he's like, I'll come visit you again tomorrow so we can get to know each other a little bit better. And Heathcliff is like, I really wish you wouldn't. Like, you don't have to do that. Like, we've met. We're good. And Lockwood is like, oh, he's just being modest or something, and is dead set on coming back the next day for reasons? For plot. I guess if he didn't come back, that would be the end of the story. Except on day 2, he decides to walk instead of take his horse. Now, in the book, we're going to see a lot of people walking or horseback riding to and from the Grange and the Heights. They're about 4 miles apart. Now, for me, to walk 4 miles on flat land in a terrain that I'm familiar with, that's about 90 minutes or so. I got short legs, don't judge me. But that's not the terrain here. It's hills and crags and moors. And I had to look up what crags and moors were because we don't got those here in Austin. It's just lots of hills and rocks and not straight roads whatsoever. So that 4 miles on foot, it seems like for these folks, that would take like 3 hours. Okay, so now we are in chapter 2 of the book. And this is when shit gets weird. In chapter 1, I was thinking about this review I saw once of Pride and Prejudice that was something like, it's just a bunch of people going over to each other's houses. And so when I read this first chapter that is just Lockwood going over to Wuthering Heights, I was like, oh, this is just going to be a book of people going over to each other's houses, isn't it? But no, because shit's about to get real weird. Chapter 2. So Lockwood comes back to Wuthering Heights on foot, and he notices it's starting to snow. And the gate is locked again. And he's like, what the fuck? I told them I was coming. It's almost like they don't want me here. Maybe it's because they told me they don't want me here. Lockwood meets a farmhand named Hareton Earnshaw, who lets him in and is like, I don't know where Heathcliff is, but the lady of the house is inside. So he goes inside, and there's a very young woman sitting at a table by herself, looking like doom and gloom personified. You know what? Young woman isn't the right term because she's like 16, but she looks more innocent and younger and depressed and clinically depressed. Lockwood mentions that she's very beautiful. She has blonde hair, big brown eyes, but her altogether vibe is just freaking him the fuck out. Then once she speaks, it's even worse. He assumes this is Heathcliff's wife since she was referred to as the lady of the house. And he's like, well, they are equally weird, but this age gap is bumming me out because she's like 16 and Heathcliff is meant to be like 38 or 39. And yeah, that age difference really bummed Lockwood out. Eventually, Heathcliff and Hareton join everyone, and the young girl starts reading a book on witchcraft and saying she's going to put spells on Heathcliff, to which Mr. Lockwood is scandalized. And I was just like, fuck yeah. Depressed child who's into witchcraft. I can dig it. I'm not digging a depressed child. It's supposed to be weird. It's weird. I like it. So Lockwood says something to Heathcliff like, oh, I've made the acquaintance of your wife. And Heathcliff is like, how? Do you got a Ouija board or some shit? And Lockwood points to the young lady and is like, oh, I thought that was Mrs. Heathcliff. And Heathcliff is like, yeah, she is. And Lockwood is like, but it's not your wife? And Heathcliff acts like Lockwood had just said the most disgusting thing possible. And he is like, that bitch? That depressed child over there? My wife? Gross. Blah. Absolutely not. That's my son's wife. And so Lockwood looks at Hareton, who looks about the right age. And he's like, oh, okay, well, that makes more sense. And he's like, oh, I thought this was your farmhand. This is your son? And Heathcliff is like, oh my God, no, this piece of shit is not my son. To which Lockwood was like, well, hey man, like maybe if you just like introduce me to everybody, I don't have to play this horrible guessing game that we're cracking on with here. Heathcliff is like, my son is dead. That is his widow. She's a little bitch and I hate her. I'm paraphrasing, but not by that much. And that's the moment that Lockwood is like, you know what? I actually don't think me and this Heathcliff guy are anything alike. And I don't think I like him very much at all. Ugh, this is uncomfortable. Anyway, so that little bit of snow that was falling turned into a blizzard. And Lockwood is like, I'm not sure I would be able to find my way home in this. And Heathcliff is like, sucks to be you. Yeah, people die all the time trying to navigate out here in blizzards. And after like a few pages of Lockwood just freaking the fuck out, slowly like getting more and more worried about what he's gonna do, Heathcliff is like, fine, you can stay here tonight. I don't have anywhere free to sleep, so I don't know. I guess you can share a bed with Joseph, or you can sleep in the attic or in the barn. And Lockwood is getting stressed out, and then like an angel from heaven appears the housekeeper, who's like, hey, there's a bedroom you can sleep in if you don't tell Master Heathcliff I told you about it. He keeps his room locked. It's been locked since I've been here. He doesn't know I have a key, though. So keep this between us, but there's a bed in there. You can sleep in that room. And Lockwood is being extra drama right now about the whole blizzard situation and how uninviting these hosts are, and everyone's fucking weird, and this family dynamic is toxic, and a secret room. What the fuck is going on here? And I loved all of this. This is very much my jam. So he's looking around this secret room, and on the window ledge, there are 3 names like written on like the windowsill or the wall or something. And it says Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Linton, and Catherine Heathcliff. I hadn't said Linton out loud. I don't feel like I have a very thick Southern accent, but every now and then I come across a word that's like, yeah, you do. Linton. Let me say that all again. So the names written on the wall, Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Linton, and Catherine Heathcliff. And he's like, who is Catherine? Why does she have so many last names? And then he comes across a stack of journals that belong to Catherine Earnshaw. And he's like, oh, is it intruding if I read all these personal effects that I found in a room that I'm not supposed to be in? And the nosiness is just so relatable to me. So I'm not going to really bother you with like everything the journals say because they're kind of boring, but it's Catherine or Kathy. And she is complaining about how her brother is a dick and how the servant Joseph is a dick. She misses her dad, and her only friend in the entire world is Heathcliff, and she wished everyone else would just leave them alone and they could just live by themselves, and how wonderful that would be. So after Lockwood has tired himself out by reading Kathy's journals, he goes to sleep, but he has some weird dreams, and he wakes up and he hears tapping on the window. So he's like, oh, that's a tree outside hitting the window, and it just spooked me. But then the tapping kind of seems like rhythmic. He's like, that can't be a branch. That has to be a person, right? And he opens the window and he tries to like reach out to stop the branch from hitting the window, thinking he's just tripping himself out, thinking it's a person. And then an ice cold hand grabs his wrist, and it's the ghost of Catherine Linton. And she's like, I have been creeping around here for 20 years, and no one will let me into my own home. Let me into the house. And Lockwood is like, what the actual fuck? And screams like a girl, like screams like a little girl. And he actually wakes up. It's actually a little ambiguous if he was actually dreaming with the whole ghost thing, or if he was awake. And a few moments later, after Lockwood screams, Heathcliff creeps in the door, not knowing Lockwood is in there. And in really the only moment of vulnerability that we're going to see with grown-up Heathcliff in this book, his voice cracks and he's like, hello? And sounds frightened and hopeful for some reason. And that's when Lockwood springs out of bed. He's like, it's me. I know I'm not supposed to be in here, but what the fuck? And Heathcliff lets out this big sigh, but before he can start laying into Lockwood for being in a room he's not supposed to be in, and that's when Lockwood interrupts him and just starts rattling off his dream. And then he gets to the part about the ghost, and he's like, and then there was this ghost woman named Catherine Linton, or Catherine Earnshaw, and she wanted to come into the house, and I told her no. And that's when Heathcliff turns on him and is like, what the fuck did you just say? How do you know that fucking name? And Lockwood is like, oh, whoops. And he didn't want to be like, oh, I've been reading her diaries all night. So instead, he's like, oh, it's inscribed in the wall over there. It just must have crept into my dreams. Sorry. And Heathcliff calms down and he's like, okay, well, it's 4 a.m. I get up at 5 a.m. anyway. So I'm not going to try to go back to sleep. So why don't you go lay down in my room and I'm going to clean up in here? Which is weird because this is the same guy that earlier was not even wanting to giving him a room. And now he's like, go lay down in my bed. And Lockwood thinks it's kind of weird too. So he acts like he's going down the hall, but instead just turns around and spies on Heathcliff. Messy. But yeah, so he's spying on Heathcliff. And to his surprise, Heathcliff starts sobbing, like guttural, like from the depths of his soul, sobbing and crying. And he opens the window and he's shouting, Catherine, of course you can come in. Please, Kathy, come to me. And just like screaming for this Catherine woman. And Lockwood is just like, oh my God, where the fuck am I? And as soon as the sun comes up, he's like, I am getting the fuck out of here. What the hell is going on at Wuthering Heights? So he gets home around noon because he got lost a little bit and finally makes his way back. And when he gets home, his housekeeper, who is hired by Heathcliff, because remember, Heathcliff owns the Grange and Wuthering Heights. And so Heathcliff staffs both. And so the housekeeper rushes up to Lockwood and is just like, oh my God, I thought you were dead. Where have you been? We didn't know what to do. And Lockwood is like, I'm fine. I'm just exhausted. I'm in wet clothes and I'm starving. I am going to go put on some dry clothes. In a few minutes, can you please come and bring me something to eat by the fire? And the housekeeper is like, yes, absolutely. You go get changed. We're just so happy you're back, blah, blah, blah. So we meet Lockwood by the fire in his dry clothes. And the housekeeper, who we learn is Mrs. Ellen Dean, though she's called Nellie for the most of the book. Nellie is super, super friendly and chatty and super concerned. Just like, why did you want to go back to Wuthering Heights anyway? I thought you wanted seclusion. And Lockwood is like, he's like eyeballing her. He's looking at Nellie. He's trying to suss her out. He's like, I want the tea. What is up with the people at Wuthering Heights and why is everybody so weird? Is Nellie going to gossip with me? I don't want to come off as tacky and let her think that I'm a gossip. He also says something really funny, which is like, I was afraid she was just going to gossip about herself, which I was not interested in. Like, he has very specific tea that he's here for. So he's like, what do you know about Wuthering Heights? Trying not to seem like a gossip. Do you have a minute? Keep me company for a few minutes and talk to me while I eat. And just, hey, if you know anything about these people over at Wuthering Heights, I am interested. And Nellie is like, oh, you want the tea on Wuthering Heights? And she's like, I might know a thing or two. How much time you got? You got about 300 pages and 20 years worth of time left? Let's go. And I think that's where we're going to leave this session, part 1 of Wuthering Heights. And sets the stage as creepy deepy weirdos in a secluded mansion with ghosts and depressed children. So next, we're going to get into the backstory of Heathcliff, learn who the fuck Kathy is, Kathy, whatever. And it's going to stay weird. All right. Cheers, bitches.
If you're a nurse or future nurse, you know how challenging and rewarding this career can be. Hi there, I'm Nurse Mo, creator of the Straight A Nursing Podcast. I'd love for you to join me every Thursday as I teach nursing concepts and share tips to help you succeed in school and at the bedside. Each episode breaks down often complex information so it's easy to understand, so you can feel more confident whether you're taking an exam or taking care of patients. So subscribe to the Straight A Nursing Podcast, and I'll see you on Thursday.